Ohio gozaimasu. On behalf of all of my colleagues at Ware back in Palo Alto and Paris, I'd like to welcome all of you to the first Q2B Tokyo. We're really happy that you could all make it, and we've spent the last 6 months putting a program together that we hope you will find very interesting and informative. And we're really happy about the attendance. We thought when we put on this conference that we might have between 150 or 200 attendees. We actually had more than 350 applications for attendance, and we're capped at 350. So this year, we actually had to turn a couple of people away. So next year, we're going to have a much larger space for you. The actual conference proceedings are going to be starting in about 5 minutes, and I'll try to speed through my opening remarks. But I do want to talk to you about the purpose of Q2B, and I do want to thank all of our sponsors who have made this possible. So without further ado, so what is Q2B and what is the purpose of Q2B? I'll take you back in time a little bit. In 2015 and 16, our company was working with a number of enterprises, potential future users of quantum computing, who wanted to understand what applications and use cases could be run on quantum computing hardware. They're over here. At the same time, we have contact with all of the major quantum computing hardware and software companies who are asking the question, what hard problems do these enterprises have that we can make runnable onto this hardware? So we thought it would be important to bridge that gap, to bring the future users, the enterprises of quantum computing, and the makers of quantum computing hardware and software together. And to that end, we set up the Q2B conference in Silicon Valley in 2017. This was a 3-day session, and the purpose of it was application discovery. It was getting these two communities together and figuring out which hard problems could be run on quantum computing. And that was actually a very large success, and Q2B has been growing very substantially in the ensuing years. Now, as we thought about that success, we realized that application discovery is actually a global endeavor. It's not something that is just happening in Silicon Valley. And so we decided to export Q2B as a conference series abroad, and we wanted to target both Asia and Europe in this expansion. And in both of these geographies, we wanted to have Q2B happening in a place that was really an epicenter of quantum computing, or a real hub. And so for us in Asia, there was no question that the right place to be is here in Tokyo. And that's why this year is the inaugural year for Q2B Tokyo, and it will continue to be hosted every year in the future. Likewise, when we look over to Europe, in fact, the most aggressive and active quantum computing center is in Paris, France, and that's why starting next year, Q2B will also be held in September of 2023 for the first time in Paris. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what you'll be focusing on in the next couple of days here, and it's the same thing that the Silicon Valley groups are focusing on. Of course, one of the objectives is application discovery. We've already talked about that, but there are other things that are going on that are equally important. There are breakthroughs happening in quantum computing and major advances on a monthly and sometimes on a weekly basis. And it's very hard for any of us out here to keep track of all that activity in the course of a year. So what Q2B does is pull all of those technology vendors, hardware, software, algorithms, pulls all of them into a room, and they describe to you their products and their product roadmaps, so you can very efficiently get updated on what's happening in the quantum computing community. In addition, there is a lot of technical material that's being presented at Q2B, but fundamentally this is a business conference. There are a number of international organizations that have traveled to Japan to meet with you, the Japanese companies and developers of quantum computing technology. What they're seeking are collaborations and partnerships. They want your expertise and your partnership. And likewise, For Japanese companies, this presents an excellent opportunity to forge collaborations and partnerships with international groups, and we provide at Q2B a lot of time and space for all of that to happen, and we're looking forward to all of that with you. I want to describe in a little more detail for a second why we believe Tokyo is the ideal place for Q2B in Asia. First of all, Japan has been a leader in quantum computing technology for the last couple of decades. And in fact, one of the major breakthroughs happened here in Japan with Professor Nakamura and his group. They built the first controlled superconducting qubit, and the qubit is the fundamental building block of quantum computers. This was a big milestone. That was at the hardware layer. And at the algorithm layer, Professor Nishimori and his colleagues invented quantum annealing, which is the first practical protocol that allows a real-world problem to be executed on quantum computing hardware. But Japan's leadership doesn't stop just at an academic or research level. In fact, at the governmental level, the Japanese government has allocated over 80 billion yen to develop quantum technologies. This amount of funding and appropriations is basically equivalent to what has happened in the US under the National Quantum Initiative and subsequent presidential directives. And it's also about the same amount of money that the entire European Union has committed under the EU flagship program. So this is really a very concerted and coordinated effort at the governmental level, and probably unparalleled throughout Asia. That's on the governmental side. On the industry side, Q-STAR is a Japanese industry consortium which is pulling together all of the companies that are the makers of various parts of the quantum computing technology stack and quantum technologies generally. Q-STAR represents in Japan the same thing that the QEDC represents in the US, and by the way, the QEDC is now expanding very rapidly internationally, and it represents the same thing that QUIC is doing within the European Union. So all of these industrial consortia are kind of interlinked, and Japan here in Asia is really the hub of all of that. So now I'd like to shift gears for just a minute, and I'd like to thank the parties that have made all of this possible. So I think all of you, or most of you, know Qunasys. Like QCware, Qunasys is a scientifically driven software company that is focused on developing applications for enterprise users. And from that standpoint, they're really the perfect partner for us to launch this conference. We're co-hosting with Qunasys this year, and we hope to do this in all of the following years. Now, I talked about the essential element of having financial sponsors be present and underwriting this conference. So everything that we're doing here is only made possible by the generous financial support of our sponsors. And we have various levels of sponsorship at Q2B. And the top level, the platinum level, we're very grateful that IBM has sponsored this. And you'll be hearing from IBM in the course of today and tomorrow in speeches, and you're also going to be seeing IBM out in the exhibition hall. In addition, we have additional companies from Europe, Japan, Canada, and Israel at the diamond and gold levels who will also be giving talks, and most of those parties also have exhibition booths, so we'd also like to thank them. We do have a couple of sponsors who do not have exhibition booths, but who will be giving talk, and these companies are featured here. In addition, we have a set of sponsors who are not giving talks, but do have exhibition booths, and we really hope that you take some time to meet with all of them. Again, coming back to the QEDC, their generous support has made possible today's lunch, so we thank them very much for that, this networking event. And finally, we would like to thank Aishin, which has made possible one of the tracks, the Government and Technology track, which will be featured on day 2. So I'd really appreciate it if we could all give a round of applause to all of these sponsors. Really, really appreciate that. Let me go backwards. There should be a Japanese language, but there is not. Okay, It's okay. The agenda that we've set up for Q2B in Tokyo is basically identical to the agenda that we have in the Silicon Valley Q2Bs. So we're starting off today with an important keynote address, and for the rest of the day today, we will have talks from a large number of quantum computing vendors who are going to explain their progress on their products and their product roadmaps. This is really going to be a large informational set of sessions. And then later on today, we're going to have a very nice social hour, a happy hour, and we hope to see you all there at that. Tomorrow is broken up a little bit differently. There will be 3 separate tracks. There will be sets of meetings that will happen in 3 individual rooms, and each of those tracks have a different theme, as you can see here. So tomorrow during the day, you can rotate from track to track, depending on which topics you would like to hear. So with all of that being said, I know we're a little bit behind schedule right now. I want to thank all of you once again for coming, and I look forward to seeing all of you out and about here over the next 2 days. Thank you very much and have a great time.